Okay, guys, this is the road to revolution. This is going to be the period of time right after the French and Indian War and moving on to revolution. The question we're going to ask ourselves is, was this revolution in? Okay, this is right from your notes. Two ideas take root in the colonies, this idea of republicanism, the stability of society, the authority of the government, and a responsibility of its citizenship. So republicanism, that's kind of an enlightened, and then you're going to have this radical group of Whigs that are in England, and they are criticizing the monarchy. Thomas Paine, he's going to come to the Americas, and he is going to be one of the biggest critics of the monarchy. And they are kind of pro-colonist and pro-rights. So this is going on. And we've again been enjoying this salutary neglect. So mercantilism is going to rear its ugly head again. And remember, we've defined this before. And that is basically that the colonies are set up for the benefit of the mother country. The colonies are to basically supply the mother country with raw materials, and then they're required to buy everything from the mother country after they refine it or they make clothing and so forth. So basically it's to keep them under their thumb, and that's the idea of way back when they put navigation acts into effect, but they hadn't enforced them. But the navigation acts basically said that all goods must be shipped to England, and there was a duty put on them. And then cash crops like tobacco could only be sold to England, and that the money shortages in colonies were only because of trade. Printed money was from colony to colony, and Parliament said that the colonies could not have their own money. So this is going to be a huge, huge problem with trade. So what are the negatives of mercantilism? It's, how can you create a business and so forth when everything has to go through the mother country? You can't have industry. You can't have your own textile mills. So you're depending on English agents and creditors, and they felt used. Okay, at this point in time, the colonists have been in this area for well over 100 years, and they are being treated like children. So the positives are shipbuilders in New England, they actually are benefiting. They do have a monopoly on tobacco in England, and we do have protection by the strongest navy in the world. Adam Smith writes in his famous book, Wealth of Nations, to prohibit a great people, however, from making all that they can of every part of their own produce, or from employing their stock and industry in the way they judge most advantageous to themselves, is a manifest violation of the most sacred rights of mankind. That's how he saw mercantilism. So the British government is going to take some measures. So because of these restrictions, there's going to be an increase of smuggling in the colonies, and one guy that you might be aware of the name, John Hancock, he is right in the middle of this. So the British government, now they're kind of flexing their muscles, and they are going to issue these writs of assistance. And basically James Otis, he's going to argue against that, saying that this is against our natural rights. And basically it's the ability to search without a search warrant. Well, some of these things you're going to see are going to go into our Bill of Rights because of the abuses of the British government on the colonies. And so Otis is going to argue against it. He said that private property has to be protected, but he's going to lose. And the Parliament is going to pass these writs of assistance. So James Otis argues that a man's house is his castle, and whilst he is quiet, he is as well guarded as a prince in his castle. The writ, if it should be declared legal, would totally annihilate these privileges. I love his language. Bare suspicion without oath is sufficient. So he's saying that this is not a proper thing and shouldn't be passed, however it's passed. So this is George Grenville's program. We have a series of acts: the Sugar Act, the Currency Act, the Quartering Act, and the Stamp Act. They had a lot of debt after the French and Indian War, and because of Pontiac's War, they're going to put in the Proclamation line of 1763, which we're also going to be talking about, and they need to raise revenue. So how are they going to do it? They're going to tax these colonies. So the very first one is the Sugar Act, and of course the colonies are going to be furious over the Quartering Act and the Stamp Act. So they form a Congress, and this is another form of kind of getting the colonies together, and it's the Stamp Act Congress of 1765. We get 27 delegates from 9 colonies, and they draw up a statement of their rights. They send this to the king and to Parliament, and even though it's mostly ignored and not well known in America, the Stamp Act Congress was a step towards intercolonial unity. And the colonists are really angry about this, and this is something that they can really get behind, because anything that was purchased, anything with paper, cards, especially like lawyers, they had to pay to have that royal stamp. They're going to have a protest, all right, and they decide that they're going to boycott British goods, and this is a unity thing. People signed petitions. They swore to uphold the boycott. Women started wearing like brown cloth instead of importing British cloth, and that was kind of an identity thing. They form an organization called the Sons of Liberty and the Daughters of Liberty, and their slogan: liberty, property, and no stamps. And some would go so far as to tar and feather violators of the boycotts and British agents. So this is an example of tarring and feathering. Now this really hurt. You know, hot tar would get on bare skin, and then they dump feathers on them. And when it was removed, sometimes the skin was removed with it. Also, it could burn the skin. So although they thought it was really funny, it could be very painful. So the Stamp Act protest, England was hit really hard with this boycott. They really hurt financially. 1/4 of all the exports went to the colonies, and half all the shipping was devoted to American trade. So English make appeals to have the Stamp Act repealed, and it is. So this protest was successful, and they're going to repeal the Stamp Act. But when they do, they issue something called the Declaratory Act. And the Declaratory Act, it says the parliaments have the right to rule over the colonies, and it claims absolute sovereignty over the North American colonies. But the colonists had already made it clear they wanted a measure of sovereignty. So the Declaratory Act basically is saying, we still your papa, we are still your daddy, we still make the rules. But again, they're treating the colonies like children, and the children are like, we're getting all grown up, and we aren't going to take it. So after this, they passed something called the Townshend Acts. And Charles, they call him Champagne Charlie Townshend. He is part of the Prime Minister, and he passes these Townshend Acts, and they put a duty on goods like glass, lead, paper, paint, and tea. And this makes a distinction between internal and external taxes. This is an indirect tax paid at colonial ports, not a direct tax paid by the people. And the revenue is supposed to pay for the royal judges and governors that England sends over to rule in the colony. It's going to be very hated because it's supposedly will raise the price of tea, but it really didn't. It was just the fact that they decided they were going to do it. And a lot of our tea was smuggled in, and they ignored the tax on tea. So now what happens? The British land 2 regiments of soldiers in Boston. Da-da-da. This is
On March 5th, 1770, an incident occurred in Boston, Massachusetts between British soldiers and the Boston working class. This event became later known as the Boston Massacre. This incident is surrounded by controversy even over 200 years later. Believe it or not, the Boston Massacre all started out as a snowball fight, a one-sided snowball fight. A Boston man was throwing snowballs at a British soldier over a particular personal grievance. However, a crowd soon joined in, throwing ice and antagonizing the troops. The Bostonians were armed with clubs, knives, and swords, and the most popular weapon of the day, your own bare hands. The aggressive crowd created a tense atmosphere as they cornered the armed British troops against the wall. The troops were under the order not to fire, but in the ensuing chaos, several of them did fire into the crowd, killing 5 and wounding 6 people. Why the troops fired is still debated among historians today, but the aftermath proved to be a vital tool for the revolutionaries as they used this event to create anti-British sentiment and to promote the patriotic cause. Today we are going to analyze 2 illustrations that remember this event. Now remember, over 200 years ago, there's no such thing as photography, movies, or any other kind of media images. Artists were left to depict what events really happened. Our first image was published by the revolutionary Paul Revere. Now, because these images are paintings and not actual photographs, we have to remember there's an artist's hand involved. In trying to capture a whole significant, important event into a single illustration, we're going to see the differences in these paintings and the differences of the messages of the event that the artists are trying to convey to you, the audience. Let's start out with Paul Revere's illustration. Notice how the British troops are shown standing in a straight line, shooting the rifles in an organized assault on the crowd. Notice also that Revere's engraving shows a blue sky. Look at the top left, and you will see a moon because the event took place at 9 in the evening. Why do you think Paul Revere would do this? Take a look at the man who fell closest to the troops. What race is he? This is supposed to be Crispus Attucks, an African-American who is viewed by many historians as the first martyr of the American Revolution. Why do you think Revere would change his race in this image? Now take a look and try to find a few other clues of your own how this illustration conveys the message of the evil British attacking an innocent, unarmed crowd. Let's now move on to our second illustration, created about 100 years later in 1868 by Alonzo Chappell. Notice how the troops are surrounded by a rowdy crowd with clubs and weapons. How is this different than Paul Revere's? Notice where Captain Preston of the British troops is standing. Is he ordering the troops to fire, or is he trying to control the situation? This illustration also is missing Crispus Attucks, the African-American martyr. What could be the reasons in 1868 that an African-American will be missing from the Boston Massacre? How does Chappell's illustration differ so greatly than Paul Revere's? What memory was each artist trying to convey with their illustrations? Is either illustration the truth? Now I'll leave the big question up to you. Was this a massacre? Or was this a riot? This debate continues today amongst historians. And the debate continues on to you now. I know I just asked a lot of questions. You probably don't know all the answers to them. But the important thing is that we ask 3 major questions when we're examining any historical document. We ask who the author is, why they produce this document, and who the audience is. By using these 3 questions, we learn not to take anything at face value. I hope by using this example with the Boston Massacre, we see that there's 2 sides to every story. And not every story has a right answer. There is no right or wrong in the Boston Massacre. It's all up to interpretation. Now it is up to you, the audience, to draw your own conclusions of the Boston Massacre and decide for yourself if it was really a massacre.
Okay, so he asked several questions there. This is the Paul Revere um, painting, or actually print, that he did. Remember Paul Revere, the silversmith who's going to be writing and warning of the coming of the British troops. He actually says the regulators are coming. This is a different painting that he does not reference, and this is a painting by William L Champney. And this is done, they don't know for sure, but in the 1850s. And this one does show Crispus Attucks, and Crispus Attucks right there, front and center. You can see him with the blood on his chest. And you kind of see aggression on both sides here. You see a colonist there with, it looks like a stick raised, and then you see the aggression of the British forces. And this is kind of a gloomier background, because remember, this did take place at 9 o'clock at night. And then this is the other painting that they referenced. And of course, looky here, I'm not going, I'm stuck. So let's pause. This is the Alonzo Chappelle painting that they referenced, and you can look at that. So you are going to answer those three questions. Who is the author? Why was it produced? Look at the time. Remember, time matters. Who is the audience? And let's go for that one main question too. Why does the only one in 1850 feature Crispus Attucks? So I want you to think about those things and answer those three questions. What's the difference? Who's the man in the middle of this depiction? These are the questions you're going to be answering.